Okay, praise the Lord.
Hallelujah.
Okay, so tonight I'm going to give a presentation on the rights and responsibilities of citizens under the 1992 Constitution. To begin with, there are different categories of rights, and there are also different definitions of rights. For instance, there are natural rights, and it has been argued that natural, inalienable rights are rights that do not come from government, but they are God-given rights that one is born with. So governments only protect these rights. That is, they create political conditions that allows one to exercise them, but they do not confer those rights on us. Human rights, on the other hand, it has been argued, are rights that are conferred on us by governments, and therefore governments are under an obligation to provide those rights. And human rights may change over time. However, natural rights do not change. Now, there are other categories of rights, and these are civil and political rights, economic, social, and cultural rights, and group rights. Some countries do not recognize the existence of some of the rights, and so they do not owe it a duty to their citizens to provide it for them. In Ghana, however, we have both natural rights and human rights provided for under our 1992 Constitution. So I will take us through some of these rights shortly. For the purpose of this presentation, we are going to adopt the definition of rights as claims which can be asserted by an individual or a group and which are recognized at law. Claims which can be asserted by an individual or group and which are recognized at law. So immediately from this definition, one gets the understanding that these claims can only be made if the law provides for them. If there's no legal provision for it, then one cannot demand that such rights should be given to him or her. First of all, we'll look at the protection of the right to life, which comes under Article 13 of the 1992 Constitution. Now, the right to life is one of the natural rights that we have, in the sense that one cannot be deprived of his or her right to life. It is a God-given right, so to speak, to live. And Article 13(1) of the Constitution says that no person shall be deprived of his life intentionally, except in the exercise of the execution of a sentence of a court in respect of a criminal offense under the laws of Ghana, of which he has been convicted. So this speaks to the fact that a person can be deprived of his right to life, but only in the execution of a sentence of a court. Because in Ghana, we still have the death penalty on our books. So if you should commit a crime that is worthy of capital punishment, you can be legally deprived of your right to life. And Article 13(2) also says that a person shall not be held to have deprived another person of his life in contravention of clause 1 of this article, if that other person dies as the result of a lawful act of war, or if that other person dies as the result of the use of force to such an extent as is reasonably justified in the particular circumstances. And it gives the circumstances under which the use of force, which could lead to the deprivation of human life, may be justified. And these are for the defense of any person from violence or for the defense of property, which means that in self-defense or in defending your property from attack, you may end up depriving someone of his or her life in a lawful way. But what the provision says is that you must have applied reasonable force, not force that is excessive under the circumstances. So the circumstances will determine whether the force applied is excessive or is reasonable. And then in order to effect a lawful arrest or to prevent the escape of a person lawfully detained, or for the purposes of suppressing a riot, insurrection, or mutiny, or in order to prevent the commission of a crime by that person. So these are all circumstances in which the application of some amount of force could lead to the deprivation of human life, but which would be justified under the law given the circumstances. Now we're also going to look at the protection of personal liberty. Everyone has a right to personal liberty, and this is guaranteed under Article 14 of the 1992 Constitution. The right to liberty is also considered as a natural right and an inalienable right, which means that a person should not be unlawfully deprived of this right. Article 14(1) says that every person shall be entitled to his personal liberty, and no person shall be deprived of his personal liberty except in the following cases and in accordance with procedure permitted by law. So immediately you'll find that even though the Constitution guarantees the right, it is not absolute in the sense that given certain circumstances, you may be deprived of that right. And some of the circumstances are as follows. In execution of a sentence or order of a court in respect of a criminal offense of which he has been convicted, or in execution of an order of a court punishing him for contempt of court, or for the purpose of bringing him before a court in execution of an order of a court. So you may be deprived of your right to personal liberty when you are arrested for the purpose of being brought to court, or after you have been convicted by a court, having gone through a trial process and you are sentenced to imprisonment. That amounts to a deprivation of your right to liberty. However, it is because it is in furtherance of a lawful procedure, it is permitted under the Constitution. The Constitution further provides that a person can be deprived of his right to liberty upon reasonable suspicion of his having committed or being about to commit a criminal offense under the laws of Ghana. So if the police arrest you on suspicion that you have committed an offense, that is a lawful means of depriving one of his right to personal liberty. A person who is arrested, restricted, or detained shall be informed immediately in a language that he understands of the reasons for his arrest, restriction, or detention, and of his right to a lawyer of his choice. A person who is arrested, restricted, or detained, A, for the purpose of bringing him before a court in execution of an order of the court, or upon reasonable suspicion of his having committed or being about to commit a criminal offense under the laws of Ghana, shall be brought before a court within 48 hours after the arrest, restriction, or detention.
They said unto me, I was glad when they said unto me, I was glad. Shirawo, Trawunta Madan, Yukuminipa, Atuma Uradi, we won't so more. Where beside Dina, Wunya me pay a mouth, we are for you, Nitty Nierati, Umati Hunya, Debbie Hutu, Adumerati.
Constitution provides that under certain circumstances and for the purpose of prosecution of a criminal offense, a person may be deprived of his personal liberty. The Constitution also provides the procedures under which that can lawfully be done, so that the police cannot just arrest somebody and keep the person in custody for as long as they want, but the person must be immediately informed in a language that he understands. And even the Constitution provides that the person is entitled to an interpreter at the expense of the police, enabling him to understand the purpose for which he has been arrested. And then it says that where a person is arrested, restricted, or detained under paragraph A, and is not tried within a reasonable time, then without prejudice to any further proceedings that may be brought against him, he shall be released either unconditionally or upon reasonable conditions, including in particular conditions reasonably necessary to ensure that he appears at a later date for trial or for proceedings preliminary to trial. So this refers to the bail, the rights that a person has to be granted bail pending the investigation and prosecution of an offense for which he has been arrested. And then 5 says, a person who is unlawfully arrested, restricted, or detained by any other person shall be entitled to compensation. So if the method of arrest does not follow the procedures under the Constitution, then a person will be entitled to compensation, and you can put in an application at the Supreme Court for such compensation. So we, even though one has a right to personal liberty, we have just looked at the circumstances under which one can be deprived of that right. And we can all attest to the fact that the imposition of compulsory quarantine and even the lockdown, which we underwent a few months ago, were measures taken by government to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Although the imposition of these measures resulted in a limitation of our right to personal liberty, in that we could not move around as we wished, they were justified by the exigencies of the times, and therefore no one could lawfully challenge government's right to impose those restrictions. Now, the Constitution also guarantees respect for human dignity. That is under Article 15 of the Constitution. Article 15:1 says that the dignity of all persons shall be inviolable. Inviolable. When it is said that one's dignity is inviolable, it means that it must be respected and protected at all costs. Article 15, Clause 2 provides that no person shall, whether or not he is arrested, restricted, or detained, be subjected to torture or other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, any other condition that detracts or is likely to detract from his dignity and worth as a human being. A person who has not been convicted of a criminal offense shall not be treated as a convicted person and shall be kept separately from convicted persons. It further provides that the juvenile offender who is kept in lawful custody or detention shall be kept separately from adult offenders. Now, it will be observed that the law provides no justification whatsoever for subjecting a human being to torture, cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. Torture is not permissible as a means of extracting information from suspects or even punishing stubborn children, as some parents have been wont to do, putting the child's hands in fire and all those things. They are not permitted under the Constitution. Mob justice and other forms of cruel punishments meted out to suspects, even when they have been caught in the act, are all unlawful. It is interesting to note that a law has recently been passed in one Nigerian state permitting castration as a form of punishment for rapists. Without the passage of that law, it would have been illegal to castrate a rapist. Now, while it may seem that the prescribed punishment, actually it seems to me that the prescribed punishment is extreme, in that the offender will be deprived of his ability to procreate forever for one act of rape. However, when you look at the other side of the coin, it takes one act of rape could also have devastating consequences on a victim, psychologically for life. And the law says that the punishment should reflect the gravity of the offense. I think it is arguable whether castration itself is not a form of torture or cruel and inhuman, degrading treatment. I think it is arguable, but I leave it to you to think about it, whether passing a legislation to legalize castration as a form of punishment makes it something that is less than torture, because the law expressly forbids torture and cruel, degrading treatment. And I leave that to you to decide. Under the Constitution also, protection is given against slavery and forced labor. Article 16 says that no person shall be held in slavery or servitude. no person shall be required to perform forced labor. Article 16.3 says that for the purposes of this article, forced labor does not include any labor required as a result of a sentence or order of a court. So for instance, if you go through a trial and the court sentences you to 3 years imprisonment in hard labor, you cannot say that that labor amounts to forced labor because it is a lawful punishment. And then B says, any labor required of a member of a disciplined force or service as his duties, or in the case of a person who has conscientious objections to a service as a member of the armed forces of Ghana, any labor which that person is required by law to perform in place of such service. So if one is a member of the armed forces, any labor that he is required to perform as a result of his work cannot be described as forced labor. And then any labor required during any period when Ghana is at war or in the event of an emergency or calamity that threatens the life and well-being of the community, to the extent that the requirement of such labor is reasonably justifiable in the circumstances of any situation arising or existing during that period for the purposes of dealing with the situation. So what it is saying is that in the event that there is any war and there is a requirement for people to compulsorily do certain tasks, you cannot call that forced labor. Any labor reasonably required as part of normal communal or civic obligations. So when the MC or maybe the assemblyman declares that there's going to be communal, cleaning of the community on Saturday, you cannot say that you are being forced to work because the law permits it.
Yeah, alright.
I was glad when they said unto me. I was glad when they said unto me.
Oh, I was glad
When they said unto me,
let us go. Join the house of the Lord.
hallelujah,
Join the house of the Lord.
hallelujah,
Join the house of the Lord.
All right, we'll move on to Article 17, which deals with equality and freedom from discrimination. Article 17 says that all persons shall be equal before the law. Article 72 says that a person shall not be discriminated against on grounds of gender, race, color, ethnic origin, creed, or social or economic status. For purposes of this article, discriminate means to give different treatment to different persons, attributable only or mainly to their respective descriptions by role, place of origin, political opinions, color, gender, occupation, religion, or creed, whereby persons of one description are subjected to disabilities or restrictions to which persons of another description are not made subject, or are granted privileges or advantages which are not granted to persons of another description. So for instance, if one political party is in power and decides that it's going to give all contracts to members of that party, that is a form of discrimination. Okay. It further says that nothing in this article shall prevent Parliament from enacting laws that are reasonably necessary to provide for the implementation of policies and programs aimed at redressing social, economic, or educational imbalance in the Ghanaian society, or B, for matters relating to adoption, marriage, divorce, burial, devolution of property on death, or other matters of personal law. So it gives Parliament the right to enact laws to correct some imbalances in society. Then we have the protection of privacy. Every individual has a right to privacy of home and other property. The law says explicitly that Every person has the right to own property, either alone or in association with others, and no person shall be subjected to interference with the privacy of his home, property, correspondence, or communication, except in accordance with law, and as may be necessary in a free and democratic society for public safety or the economic well-being of the country, for the protection of health or morals, for the prevention of disorder or crime, or for the protection of the rights or freedoms of others. So that even though the right to privacy is guaranteed under the Constitution, there may be some instances where that right may be infringed. It could be in the process of investigating a criminal offense where the police may have to go to a particular place to search for, equipments that have been used in the commission of a crime, or maybe to intercept some communication in the process of investigating a crime. So there are instances when the right to privacy may also be limited. Now, the Constitution also guarantees under Article 19 a right to fair trial. It says that a person charged with a criminal offense shall be given a fair hearing within a reasonable time by a court. A person charged with a criminal offense shall, among others, there are a number of rights, and I will encourage you to find time to read the Constitution, because this is a summary of some of the important rights that are guaranteed under the Constitution. It provides, for instance, that a person shall be presumed to be innocent until he is proved or has pleaded guilty. And that is one reason why mob justice is discouraged. It is for the court to find a person guilty. That does not matter whether the person was, seen in broad daylight committing the offense. What is required of us is to send the person to court so that the person can go through a legal process by which his guilt is found, based upon which he can then be lawfully sentenced. Anything that is done outside that process is in and of itself illegal. So a person is also to be informed immediately in a language he understands and in detail of the offense for which he has been charged. A person is to be given adequate time and facilities for the preparation of his defense and to be permitted to defend himself before court in person or by a lawyer. Where a person cannot afford a lawyer, the law provides that he should be given legal aid. Okay. The law also provides for general fundamental freedoms under Article 21. Which provides that all persons shall have a right to freedom of speech and expression, which shall include freedom of the press and other media, freedom of thought, conscience, and belief, which shall include academic freedom, freedom to practice any religion and to manifest such practice, freedom of assembly, including freedom to take part in processions and demonstrations, freedom of association, which shall include freedom to form or join trade unions or other associations, national and international, for the protection of their interests. Freedom of movement, which means the right to move freely in Ghana, the right to leave and to enter Ghana, and immunity from expulsion from Ghana. You will notice that even though these freedoms have been guaranteed under the Constitution, there are sometimes legal procedures for the exercise of these freedoms. For instance, to conduct a demonstration, one needs to have approval or permission from the police. That does not mean that that right has been taken away, but it is a means of sort of supervising the exercise of that right. Now, Article 24(1) also provides for the right to work under satisfactory, safe, and healthy conditions, which is an economic right. Article 25(1) provides the right to equal educational opportunities and facilities. Article 26(1) provides the right to enjoy, practice, profess, maintain, and promote culture, tradition, or religion, subject to the Constitution. And then Article 26(2) prohibits dehumanizing customary practices. Article 29 provides the rights of disabled persons to live and to have access to all public facilities, among others. Article 42 provides the right to vote. It says every citizen of Ghana of 18 years of age or above and of sound mind has the right to vote and is entitled to be registered as a voter for the purposes of public elections and referenda. So this is a summary of some of the rights that are granted under the 1992 Constitution. And you will notice that even though these rights have been provided, there are legitimate circumstances in which the exercise of these rights may be limited. Now, Article 41 of the Constitution deals with the duties of citizens. It says that the exercise and enjoyment of rights and freedoms is inseparable from the performance of duties and obligations, and accordingly it shall be the duty of every citizen, 1, to promote the prestige and good name of Ghana and respect the symbols of the nation, which means that every citizen has a duty to promote the prestige and good name of Ghana. It means that in our speech we must say good things about our country. I think that oftentimes we rather look at the negatives instead of projecting the good things. But we have a duty, and it is important that we as Ghanaians speak well of our country to others and also respect the symbols of our nation. We also have a duty to uphold and defend the Constitution and the law. And that is why the Constitution itself provides that if anyone does an act that is inconsistent with the Constitution, an individual can go to court for a declaration that that conduct is inconsistent with the Constitution. The Constitution gives us that right because we have a duty to uphold and defend the Constitution. And also we have a duty to foster national unity and live in harmony with others. We also have a duty to respect the rights, freedoms, and legitimate interests of others, and generally to refrain from doing acts detrimental to the welfare of other persons. This may include acts such as infringing on the rights of other people, on their right to life, on their right to property, especially when it comes to social media these days. Social media is being used in many ways that are negative, but we need to remember that we have a duty under the Constitution to respect other people's rights and to work conscientiously in our lawfully chosen occupation. The Constitution says lawfully chosen occupation, which means that there are some occupations that are unlawful. I mean, armed robbery is not a lawful occupation. And then to protect and preserve public property and expose and combat misuse. I mean, there's a duty on every citizen to protect public property. So, that we must have that attitude that public property belongs to all of us. Some people feel that when others are trying to protect public property, they are behaving like it belongs to them. Of course, we all have an interest in it. So we all have a duty to preserve and protect public property and ensure that public funds are not misused. And then to contribute to the well-being of the community where that citizen lives. every citizen has a duty to defend Ghana and render national service when necessary, to cooperate with lawful agencies in the maintenance of law and order. So that if, for instance, the police are investigating a criminal offense, our duty is to cooperate with them and not to hinder them from doing their work, and to declare his income honestly to the appropriate and lawful agencies, and to satisfy all tax obligations. You notice that sometimes we fall short in this area, that a lot of people may be working and not declaring, paying their taxes, and that affects, the development of the nation. And the Constitution says that we have a duty to declare our income honestly and to satisfy all our tax obligations. And then we also have a duty to protect and safeguard the environment. We all know, we can all see the destruction that our actions are causing to our environment, our littering of the environment, and other things that we do that has caused the deterioration. We can talk about galamsey, we can talk about just even the heap of rubbish, that we see around town, and how this is actually degrading our environment. This kind of conduct, as we can see, is not permissible under the Constitution. The law actually says that we rather have the duty to protect our environment, to ensure that our water bodies are clean, to ensure that we keep our environment neat for our own health and sustenance and development. And so these are the duties that are imposed on citizens under the 1992 Constitution. So this evening, what we have done is to look, first of all, at the rights that have been provided us under the 1992 Constitution, and then also to look at our duties as citizens. Let us not just demand our rights, but let us also perform our duties as citizens to make our nation great. Thank you for your attention.
No, I yes, say,